Ike Live, brought to you exclusively by Abu Garcia.
Hey everybody, how you doing? I hope you're having a wonderful day, night, evening, wherever you're watching and listening. I want to welcome you to a brand new Ike Live show. And guys, we have a good one for you today. Joining us in just a second, a good friend of mine, longtime friend of mine, Rob Newell, is going to join the show. And I'm excited to have Rob on. It's first time on Ike Live, but big moment for Rob with a new book, release of a new book. And can't wait to talk to him about that project and generally just catch up with Rob. It's been a little while since we've connected, so it's going to be good. Let me remind you that this show is brought to you by Abu Garcia, the maker of great rods and reels. Head over to abugarcia.com. Check out their great gear, including, guys, you ready for this? Brand new Ike Series 3.0 rods and reels, officially launched now. So you can get them anywhere, including Tackle Warehouse. So if you're watching this, and it's a little late to get it for a Christmas gift, but if you're like, man, I got some money, I got an Amazon gift card, I got a Bass Pro gift card, dude, check out the brand new Ike Series 3.0. You're going to like it. Also brought to you by the Ike Foundation. I had a note from my beautiful wife, Becky. Head on over to the IkeFoundation.org if you want to find out how to get kids fishing. But January 31st is the Ike Foundation Scholarship Dinner. Tickets and tables still available. So if you want to come out for a great night of camaraderie, food, fun, even music. Guys, we have a live band there this year called Don't Call Me Francis. Actually, a good band. I got a good story for you for that, but I'll tell you that on another point. Great event. All that money raised is going to go towards scholarships and getting new kids fishing. Come hang out with me. January 31st, Ike Foundation Scholarship Dinner. Head to the website. You can get information on how to get tickets there. All right. Enough of that stuff. I want to get Rob on to talk about a lot of stuff, but especially the book. Here he goes, Rob Newell. Rob, what's up, man?
How you doing, Ike? You doing all right?
Dude, I said right before we came on, we got to just do a little mic check thing, and I said, man, it's good to see you. It is good to see you. It really is. It's great to see you.
Yeah, we've been friends for a long time, and we don't talk very much, Ike, but when we do, we have those long, deep conversations that are pretty insightful, and we solve a lot of the world's problems. So it's always a pleasure to have a conversation with you, Ike.
Dude, it's great. I feel like we come from the same cloth a little bit. I always felt like this very natural connection when we talked. And not that I didn't have that with some of the other writers and stuff, but I feel like we're kind of cut from the same cloth. And when I've read this book, we're going to get in this second, but when I read it, I'm like, oh, shit, yeah. Me and Rob are like the same dude. We like grew up in different parts of the country, but so many of the things that I read from your experiences, I'm like, dude, that's me. That's me. The biggest thing, dude, it's been 30-plus years for you. It's been 30-plus years for me. What the hell how'd that happen that quick?
That's what happens when you get into something you love and you really have a passion for. It goes back. Time just flies by like that. And, one of the catalysts for the book was none other than, I've got it in my collection, Ike. I do. Oh, there it is, baby. Yes, sir. Yes, I bought that. I was looking at the label last night. I bought it at a Walmart for $15.84. It's back when Walmart still had the star between Wall and Mart. That's how long ago. I think it was 2005, about that time you put that book out.
That's correct.
Yeah. I've read that thing 2 or 3 times, and you're right. Our backgrounds are so similar. It's scary. Reading about your childhood and reading about the breakdancing and the cruise and the DJing. We grew up in the 80s, man, 80s and 90s. And that's what was happening. A lot of people wouldn't believe it, but I had my own dance crew, and we were, we had a break dance crew and the whole thing. And we had the dance offs, and the whole thing in that era was just so awesome. I know you were more of a breaker. I was more of that popper and locker kind of guy, but And then even getting into the stuff about like bottle collecting that you used to do and metal detecting. And I'm like, man, this guy's been down all the roads that I've been down, just that adventure and fun. And yeah, so that book is certainly a catalyst for me. If you read in the book, Bass Wars, another big one for me. But
I have many times, many times.
your story, your heroes, your story in that book is pretty awesome.
That's so cool. It's like I never get over this when I talk to people and they're like, yeah, I used to break dance too, and I'm like, what? I used to treasure hunt too, and I'm like, dude, how many of us can there be out there? but when you talk to somebody that likes those same things, it's awesome. Now I have a question. Do you remember the name of your breaking popping crew? Do you remember the name of your dance crew?
It was like it was like the loose crew or the loose group. I mean, we were we had I remember we had I think we had a 5-man crew, and most of us were big tall guys that were mostly poppers and lockers, but we had one little guy who got in the middle and did all the shuffling and spinning and all that.
Yeah.
And how that all worked. You'd surround them. You know, one of the things, and we'll get into this, into the sport, but one of the things that was so cool about that culture was when a bunch of crews got together from different parts of the, different parts of where you live, different backgrounds. You came together with almost kind of this like gang kind of look, the hoods and everything. But as you pointed out in that book, I remember this, the respect for each other's crews and letting them dance and letting them do their thing. And then you took your turn and did your thing. And then they did their thing. And then no matter who was declared the winner, at the end, there was just always a whole lot of camaraderie and respect.
Yeah.
And I found that very same thing when I discovered tournament bass fishing in the early years. The amount of respect for each other, and really in a case of like, yes, you went out on the water and you competed and it was hardcore. And sometimes you got into, little skirmishes. We all know about those. But at the end of the day, when a guy won, you shook his hand.
Yes.
And you did things in the sport out of pure respect. You followed the rules for respect. You followed the state laws for respect out of the sport. And I don't know what happened at that time. It went away in the 80s or 90s. I don't know, but it's just, we're just in a different time now. And I think when you get to our age, you start to realize that time changes and there's really nothing you can do about it. You just got to kind of roll with it.
Yeah, there are a lot of similarities between fishing and some of these other activities, but that one is spot on, and I would agree with you. And you do kind of wonder what happened to those days. What happened to that era of respect, and we'll get into some of that, but I think it does carry into fishing too. I know you addressed that in the book, and I think that's missing not just from fishing, but I think it's missing from life a little bit these days, that respect for other people. And man, it's tough to swallow when you come from the 80s. Because it was a different time back then. I did want to jump back, and you mentioned that book that you got at Walmart. I did want to tell a funny story that Rob, I've never told the story before, but you held up the book, said you got at Walmart. I'm like, and it like ran through my mind. I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. So unlike you, I worked with some co-writers. I worked with a publisher. Like this was like this big, drawn out, unbelievable process. So glad I went through that experience. But I remember in the editing process that, we had to go through probably, I want to say like 3 to 6 revisions, right? And they were revisions that I was doing and the publishers were doing. And the publishers had to come back with a big revision which eliminated a lot of the cussing out of the book, which it's the way I spoke, right? It's the way I speak. So there was a bit more of cussing. So they came back with this revision, and I was like, why are you taking this out? Like this is the way I talk. It's me. And they're like, well, we're trying to put the book in Walmart, and we have to.
Yeah,
Walmart-based revision so that it could be placed in the Walmart stores. But People bought the book in Walmart, and I'm glad they did. So it was
Yeah,
worth the revision, you know?
it had to go in the G-rated department
That's
over
right.
there at Walmart. Yeah, I was flipping through it again last night for the first time in a long time, and I was reading a couple chapters that I was like, there were places where I knew a cuss word should have been, and it
Yeah.
was changed. And I was like, I didn't catch that the first time around, but this time around, like I've listened to Ike long enough. I know they cleaned that book up right
Oh
there
yeah.
without a
Oh
doubt.
yeah. The other thing when you held it up, and I want to ask you this because now that this thing's out, um, I remember how I felt, and you just even holding this book up all these years later, I still feel it. But, dude, you know the cool thing about a tangible, right? Like the written word in something that you can touch and
Right.
feel and see, like how how do you feel? You know, I want to get your take on it because I know how I feel. But you know, this thing's in the wild. It's an actual. It's in the environment. It's a thing. How
Right.
how does that feel? How does that make you feel?
It's kind of a real vulnerable process because you pour a lot out there, and we're in a different time now. When you put your book out, a lot of people still read. I mean, the internet was just coming on. It wasn't a video driven world, and a lot of people said I was crazy, and rightly so, to write about such a niche sport that's already a niche sport, and to write about it in a time when just fewer and fewer people just don't read.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's just everything's video driven. It's the way our content and our media has gone these days. But I mean, I wanted to return to the written word because of my roots. I grew up a just voracious reader of everything from the Hardy Boys to Stephen King to, all the way to Bass Wars and a lot of literature, Henry David Thoreau, Ralph Waldo Emerson, all that kind of stuff. And I've always loved the written word. And I wanted to return to that as kind of a swan song kind of thing, just a memoir.
Yeah.
And I knew, like, people don't read anymore, but at that point, when I started that book, I didn't care. It's one of those things, you don't care if one person reads it or 10,000 people read it.
Right.
You write it because you got something in your heart. You want to purify your soul in this way. You want to get it all out. You want to write it down and get it out there for people to read. And you don't want to be, I've already had people that have kind of responded to the book a little bit. Oh, I thought you were going to name names and do all this stuff that you know about, throw these people under the bus. And I'm just not that kind of person. I wanted to, crack the door open a little bit and let
Yeah.
people who don't know sort of what goes on behind the scenes of these sports, how these cycles have continued for 30 years to kind of keep the sport in a place of, I'm just like you, Ike. I feel like this sport has the potential to be, I'm not going to say the NFL or NASCAR, but I'm going to say certainly bigger than cornhole and pickleball, for God's sake. You know what I mean? Like, it really has a lot of potential to be. I've always felt that way. I've always believed that this sport has something special about it. And I've always wanted it to stick into more of a mainstream America, and we've in this throughout this time in this industry, we've certainly seen glimpses of hopes of that. The ESPN days, you had a lot to do with the growth in mainstream America. You guys like you and Ike and Ish. But getting back to your question, I just wanted to get it out there. I don't really care. I know it's a book, and I'm going to put out a Kindle version, in the new year and that kind of thing. But I did want to get it, and it is a little, I don't know, I don't. It's a weird thing when the proof showed up in the envelope, and I took it out and held it in my hands, and I was like,
Yeah.
wow,
Yep.
like. And it's kind of the miracle what Amazon KDP is about anymore. I worked on that book for 14 months. I pretty much sequestered myself to the office, didn't fish, didn't do anything, worked on it probably 6 or 7 days a week, really committed to it. There were several times when I thought it wasn't going to happen. I bit off more than I can chew. And when you get into cover design, and my wife, Noelle, played a big part in this book, helping me put it together. And of course, that kind of stuff always leads to arguments about layout and design. You're probably familiar with some of these disagreements that just take on, like, and you think, God, if I wasn't trying to write this dumb thing, I wouldn't even. So when you finally hold it in your hand and you're like, and you feel kind of vulnerable, like, well, there's no going back now.
Right.
Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like, whatever I put in there,
Yeah.
there's no going back. I mean, in your book, I mean, you probably, I don't know when the last time you went through it and reread it, but there's probably some things that you might go back in there and go, maybe shouldn't have said that.
Oh,
I don't
yeah.
know.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know, like, and your candidness in that book about your previous relationship and stuff like that,
Yeah.
it's so real.
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't been through that myself, but I have friends that have. And the way it's just, this book, this one here is still, I mean, that is on the reading list for sure. Even if you don't read anymore, that one right there, it's great.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I'm just in my mind. I'm like, yes, 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 because I went through this, and what you said, I think, is for me was the biggest reward all these years later, and I think it will be for you too. There's two parts, and the one is it's freeing. It is freeing, right? It's
Yeah.
freeing to
Yeah.
write down these things and to let it go, to let it out. So when I did that, like I get to do it all the time now with this podcast. We've been doing Ike Live now for 11 years, so I get to do it here. But back then, there weren't podcasts, and even the world of fishing back then was a little more politically tight. Like you couldn't say things, but Rob, it felt so good to let those things out. It really did. So from the fishing stuff to the relationship stuff, like honestly, I feel like that book healed me quicker. Like when you go through something like that, you're hurt. You're damaged, and it helped me heal quicker. So I think,
it's kind of like putting a note in a bottle and throwing it out in the ocean, and you don't know who's going to get it or where it's going to land or if they'll even respond. It's like, it's kind of like one of those deals, but you just know you did it and you put it out there. And there has been, I have a lot of close friends that have told me, like, man, ever since you put that book out, you're the old Rob I used to know 10 years ago, in terms of your enthusiasm for fishing and I do owe it to the book. The day it went out, and since then it's just been, so far no regrets. I haven't had any of those calls yet, like, you shouldn't have put this in there. We're gonna, so yeah, fortunately, not, knock on wood, I'm not wishing for any of that, but so.
And the other thing I was going to say, Robin, I think as time goes on, like 5-10 years from now, it's one of those things where you're like, I'm glad I did it. I'm glad I had that opportunity, and I think that'll be the same for this project for you. And like, I look back and I'm like, man, just amazing that I had that opportunity to do it, and I'm glad I did it, So I think you'll have that same thing. The other thing I do want to get back, before we get into the book, though, I want to get back into that it's actually a book. Like
Right.
like Vegas, my son Vegas is a fish head, and before school this morning, he was like, what do you got going on? I'm like, well, I'm doing a podcast this morning with Rob Newell, and I explained it, and I'm like, and he was almost like, he didn't say it in exact words, but he was almost at 13, like, people still write books? Yeah.
That's
He was kind of like
right.
looking at me like, what? Like he's like, I'm talking about dinosaurs or something.
Right.
You do address it in the book a little bit, but we are in this weird time. And it's funny, Rob, that we're doing this now, because the last show I had, the show was basically, is AI killing journalism? That was my last podcast. Then we go to this show. But it's got to feel good, though, to return to, like, I don't know the right way to say it, but I read a lot of stuff today that doesn't have emotional connection to the text. And whether it's AI or whether it's somebody reporting or writing that doesn't have that passion. And I love that as I read this, like, I can feel the emotion, the feeling. Like, I just feel like a lot of journalism is missing that today. Do you feel like that? And are you proud that you did that with this project?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, just, one of the hardest things about closing the book, really, and finishing it, my target date was like September. Um, Definitely by October, by mid-October, I thought I would be done, just the timeline I was on. But it's the written word simply cannot keep up anymore with how fast all of this changes. I mean, I don't need to, the whole change of the sport. Like every time I went to close the book, something else popped up on the radar screen and I had to address it.
Right, you were like
Huh?
writing like, this is it. I'm done. And then, ting, oh shit, I
Just
didn't cover this. Ting, oh, wait a minute. What about this?
it just kept coming then it got into November and December. I mean, I had this thing was a wrap. Literally, we were putting it in Amazon KDP, pushing the print button, and in that same day, literally, the Bass Elite Series came out with the no entry fee announcement. And I'm like, that's a huge, like, yes. Like I have written a whole book about how entry fees have been, going up and it's a problem and, we got to get control. And they come out with no entry fees. And I'm like, whoa, stop everything. I got to go back and rewrite like and I mean, this happened. And I finally realized, like, if I don't close this thing up and call it good and put a period on it, it would never end.
Right.
It's never, because the changes just keep coming and coming and coming.
Yeah.
And I knew I had to stick to kind of what the bases were in that book. And that was sort of the history, no matter what happens from here on out. I was worried about the kind of the contemporary nature of the book. It's sort of a modern era thing. And if this sport changes even more drastically in the next couple of years, it's likely not even to be relevant anymore. But that's a risk I took. I made a bet that we in this sport seem to be caught up in the same cycles of these longevity cycles that I'm going to bet that if I wrote about it now, I mean, some of the stuff you wrote about in your book are still kind of hamstringing the sport today, and you wrote that 20 years ago.
Right.
So, it is kind of but a lot of the more emotional parts of the book were in the beginning, the introduction chapter where I pay homage to the Craig Lambs and the Louis Stout, Tim Tuckers of the world. A lot of those guys, Steve Price. I mean, those you guys, the anglers were my for sure. The Denny's, the Cluns, the Cochrans for sure.
Me too.
But the guys that brought them to life back then were those writers. We didn't have any other way to see them. Bob Cobb did a TV show. It came on, once a week. But in terms of like, you know what I mean? Like constant getting inside these guys' heads and see it, I owe an homage to that. And I did have to relive. I tell you what it really did. I think I can speak for a lot of people, especially our age, when I say that this sport is not what it was. In the last 5 to 10 years, it hasn't been what it is. And it's left sort of I don't want to, I mean, I know I'll say it for myself. It's sort of a dark place in me. And we've talked about this before.
Yeah.
And you get lost in that. Like, what is this becoming? Like, why is it going this way? Writing that book helped me relive some of the memories of why I love this sport.
Right.
The early days of, and every angler goes through this. I call it the honeymoon phase of the sport. It's the most magical time. If you're a competitive bass fisherman of any type, if you're just a bass fisherman, when you first start out on tour, and you go to the Champlains and the Okeechobees and the Toledo Bends for the first time with your buddies, and you get together with your buddies at a tournament, it is pure freaking magic. It is pure magic. And nobody can talk you out of that. Nobody. It is living a dream, whether you're catching them or not. It is just a magical place. I'm sure you deal with this in the last 5 years or so, just getting up to go catch a plane flight, to go talk about a tournament is just like, oh my God, I can remember, Ike, and I'm sure you're the same way. I can remember like, all right, I'm going to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning to drive to Beaver Lake. To hell with it. I can't sleep. 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm jumping in the van.
go.
16 hours. I couldn't wait to get there. I mean, I was,
Just go.
yeah,
If it's
yes,
dark, I'll wait in a parking lot until the sun rises. I just want to
that's
be there.
that's
Yeah.
exactly right.
Oh, dude,
That's exactly right.
by the way, that I'm jumping ahead of my notes, but that chapter, since you said it, it was, I have it written down here somewhere, chapter 24, and it was the career path.
Mm-hmm.
Dude, that was the most accurate description of a professional's career. It's like it was just so, it hit me so hard because I'm in the final I'm in the final stage there. So I'm reading it, and that beginning one that you're talking about, I'm like, oh my God, I remember that. Dude, I remember that. Like it was yesterday. And then like, you go through and I'm like, that's true? Absolutely. And then you get to the end and you're like, oh man, that's where I'm at. It was kind of like that. But I want to jump back and say that, dude, when I read this thing, and I'm not a hardcore fast reader. It took me about 4 or 5 days. I read it at night. I love reading at night, so I just took couple chapters every night. But dude, it felt like everything that I've been feeling and internalizing. Some of it I let bits and pieces of it go here on the podcast and other places, but a lot of it have just been things that I've kept bottled up and feeling and internalizing. Dude, I read it. And so I wanted to say thank you for writing this for guys like me. It felt so good, like when you're reading something, you're like, God, this is exactly what I'm thinking, and somebody else is saying it, so it's like a validation of what you're thinking. So I wanted to thank you for that. But guys, if you're watching this right now, this is a good book. Rob, I've read a lot of them. In my opinion, this new book is a great project. It's a must-read. So I encourage everybody to get this book. We're going to talk about it at the end of the show. But, dude, I kind of want to start by the story. I think it's chapter 1 or 2, Rob. This fictional character.
Right.
Dude, it was a genius way to start the book because it got you sucked right in to why people want a professional bass fish. It did for me. Like when I read that about that character, I'm like, God damn it, Rob's talking about me. You know what I mean? But like, I think if you have the dream, if you live the dream, if you want to do the dream, like you're reading that and you're like, that's me. Talk about that. I want you to talk about that character, that fictional character, because it was a great way to start the book.
Yeah, the guy's name was Creston Radisson, and people, first of all, were like, how did you come up with that name? Basically, what I tried to do is just I typed a million names into Google to make sure that I wasn't going to infringe on a guy named, Joe Smith, that's right, right. Right. That's exactly right. So I had to go through, so many different names, and finally came up with Creston Radisson, and I couldn't find a single one. There might be a guy out there, no Facebook search, no Google search, everything spelled that way. Couldn't find it. And it's weird you say that, because I was really torn on starting the book that way because it's supposed to be a nonfiction memoir, right? And the first thing I'm doing is starting with a fictional story. And part of me thought that would be really weak to some degree. Like people would just be like, I want to get on to the part where, we're going to throw some people under the bus. Where's that part? And they would just skip right over this. Who's Creston Radisson? I figured there'd be people typing like, I don't see him in the Bassmaster, archives. I don't see Creston Radisson. Who's he talking about? So it was sort of a risk, but it turned out far better. That opening chapter
was great.
It gets the most comments. I've literally had other professional anglers say, I felt that. I've had a couple say, I got actually choked up. That was me. I was that guy.
That's me. I'm like, Rob's writing about me. I'm like, he's using my story without my permission. But it did, for me, it did draw me in. And I thought it was awesome. And that character, he is, I think, the reason that people love the competitive side of this sport, right?
That's
You
it.
know, dude,
That's
whether
it.
you're the weekend guy that fishes for a club, you're a kayak guy, or you're the next elite qualifier, the next Bass Pro Tour qualifier, dude, that is why you do it. And I thought it was amazing that the book started like that. I loved it, absolutely loved it. Thought it was great.
Yeah, I appreciate it because it was, like I said, it was a big risk. And I've had people tell me after they finished the book, man, you could have just taken the Creston Radisson character and grown that and I've been fine with it. Just the series, my wife reads, a lot of fiction and stuff. And she's already been, oh yeah, we need a fictional, we need a fictional deal where there's, the side of the sport. We need murder and affairs and all the fictional stuff in the James Patterson novels and all of the the crime novels and the romance novels, like, and I'm like, I don't know that I can get to all that, but a lot of people were just that Creston Radisson grabbed me by like the shirt collar right off the bat, and and kind of threw me into the rest of the book. So and then it did cross my mind, and I had a couple people tell me they were disappointed in this, that I didn't end the book with a Creston Radisson chapter. You know what I mean? With like a Creston Radisson 15 years from now, but I didn't want to go there. I thought about it. It did cross my mind, but I wanted to, you know, maybe
Yeah, I like that it leaves it open though.
right.
It's
Yeah.
almost like a tease for the next project, which I like. And it's funny, we start talking about fiction and novels and stuff like that. And Dave Mansu, Dave Mansu, friend of mine from New Jersey, fished professionally for a little bit. His wife Andy writes these fictional romance novels, and wildly successful writing
Wow.
these novels, romance novels on fictional situations. So if you ever need some assistance, like as you were saying that, I'm like, yeah, like I imagine Creston being like a young Byron Velvick, like not Byron now, but like Byron in his 20s,
Yes.
like the
Yeah.
flowing hair, and like I'm like, yeah, we can illustrate it so that it's a picture of young Byron Velvick as Creston and.
Yeah. Byron on The Bachelor, that one. Yeah.
Younger Byron, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny you should say that. I won't go into the stories of it because I'm sure everybody has Byron Velvick stories. He's a legend in the sport. I actually drew him in the early '90s at an invitational in Lake Lanier, and it was one of the most memorable days. Like I was so keyed up and just like tense ball of nerves, and Byron, he's laid back and just let the party happen and let's roll. It was a real eye opening experience, but yeah, we'll have to see what happens with old Creston Radisson. I've even heard people already talking about merchandise and this and that and the other thing, and I'm like, whoa, let's sell some books first, and then maybe do another one, and we'll move on with Creston somewhere else down the line.
That's awesome. I love that this book was to me, it was like this very great mix of history, of things that are happening, of the trajectory of what will happen. I love that mix of things, but I just bullet point. I wanted to run these past you, and kind of these were like highlights for me that really like kind of opened up my eyes and verified some things. So
Okay.
the pay scale thing was unbelievable. I love that because it put in the like I'm trying to describe this correct way. Like I for years felt like we were being screwed, right? Like a lot of us did. And then you actually turn the pages and you're looking at this pay scale and you're like, God, we're moving backwards. What?
Right.
Talk about that. Like, was that? Why did you put that in? And was that important to put in? Because I thought it was awesome. Like seeing it in print made you really say, "Yeah, we are. This is bad."
Yeah, it's that chapter actually of all the chapters took the most time, the absolute most time. It took the absolute most times in terms of research and making sure I had the numbers right. I added up those numbers backwards and forwards and as many times as I could, double checking. Um, it was the longest chapter. It took the most time because of the formatting it and getting it right to put in the book, the charts and everything. And my wife was an angel in making that happen. She spent a lot of time making that happen. But I guess the moment that happened was last October, November, when I decided to write this book. I started going through a lot of old stuff in my closet of just memorabilia and whatever. And I happened to have the payout schedule from the old FLW tour tournaments. The brochure, long before you just signed up online, remember they used to send the brochure to you with all the payouts in it.
Right.
And I looked at those payouts in that moment in time, and this was just last year, and I went, oh my God,
Yeah, you were blown
this is the
away.
type
You were blown
this is the
away.
type of money that we used to fit. I was covering the sport at this time, and I had forgotten about this. I had forgotten, Ike, about the E50s that went on with ESPN that paid $250,000 to the winner, no entry fee.
Yeah.
And the last place was like $5,000 to the top 50 that were invited. And that was 3 or 4 times a year. And I think that one of the things about the sport is everybody forgets about the history. Not everybody. I shouldn't say everybody. We have a tendency to forget about the history.
Yeah,
And,
especially a lot of the newer anglers, right, getting in. A lot of these young guys, they do forget. They bypass
well,
it.
that was the real turning point in making that chapter happen. I realized there are probably young guys getting in the sport today
Yeah.
who have no idea
Right.
that payouts used to look like that in the sport.
Yeah.
No idea.
It's crazy.
I mean, and I thought, what would the kids do if they knew this is what like a payout looked like, or
Yeah.
or even more? And then that led into like, man, you remember like the FLW team deals? I mean, they were, man, what guys would do for a deal like that today, a memo build boat. That was pretty much back then. It was a case of like, you got a boat to use for a year and you just turned it back into a dealer
Did.
and got another one. And they got use of a truck, a Chevy truck at the time. Um, they got entry fees comped. I mean, basically, they were fishing for free, so to speak.
Yeah.
I mean, without choking on all of the debt and payment that a guy has to make these days in terms of buying a boat, in terms of getting a truck, and then,
Yeah.
entry fees. I mean, none of that was a factor. And, you know, I just started really digging deep into the payouts and everything. And I think that unfortunately, in terms of the forgotten part, there's a lot of people, the leagues and stuff want you to forget about
They
that.
want you to forget.
Yes.
Absolutely, they want you to forget.
And I was like, I'm going to resurrect this so
Right.
people can see like where we were in a peak in this sport.
Yeah.
Now I did, and
Yeah.
sorry, I wanted it to be like, I'm not making these numbers up.
Yeah.
This is printed numbers. This is how it used to be. Scott Suggs really won $1 million in a tournament.
He really
You know what I mean?
David
And
Dudley really won all that money when he was fishing back then too. Yeah,
yep, yep,
I loved it. I thought it was great to see it in print like that because it does make it real, right? Instead of it's always been around in my head like, oh yeah, this is bad, but I loved seeing it, and I think you're right. I think it's an eye opener, and I've said before many a times like in what other walk of life in a profession, right, would you work for less money as time goes on, as your career advances, as the sport advances, as the world advances, as the what other walk of life, would a doctor, an attorney, right? Are you going to work
right.
for less 10 years later? It's like happening in fishing, but everybody's just kind of like, okay, so I love that. And I also thought it was a great setup for your description of the eras of fishing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you have three, and I thought that was again a lot of as I'm reading, I'm just like, oh my god, this is what I'm thinking. And I feel the same way, right?
Mm-hmm.
Talk about that without, because I don't want to give away too much of the book, but your description of those three eras, right, all the way leading up to now, which is the modern era, I thought was perfect. And I was involved in the golden era, which I love. I'm so thank you God for allowing me to be a part of that era.
Me too. Hey, me too, Ike. I paid a lot of bills in those days that I don't have to pay these days. That golden era. It's hard for people to believe what it was like, even as a writer. I was working for big companies too. I was working for Yamahas and Lucky Crafts, and the amount of money that was being paid to cover tournaments and write stories. And man, we were all in a really, really, really good place. And, it's weird how time goes by and how it's funny how sometimes in life, you don't really realize what you had until it's gone. And then you look back and go, wow, man, it was,
How good it was. How good
yes.
you had it.
Yes. And that's really what the more I dug and the more I wrote in terms of bringing back good memories, the kind of memories I'm talking about of why we all did this back in the day. Those memories started to come out and it really flowed. And I remembered what I loved about this sport so much. So it's really just, the golden age was, I call that, pretty much the peak of the sport in my mind. Everybody has an idea where that is. Some people call it the 90s. I definitely can see, where that comes from. I call it 2007, mainly because through all my research of payouts, that's where all the payouts peaked, was in that particular year before the recession. And I called anything from really kind of the late 80s to up into 2007. I kind of called that the especially the late 90s, early 2000s, when it the real golden era, as I define it in the sport, is the 10-year period when Walmart was the sponsor of the FLW Tour, the biggest retailer on earth, and ESPN had bought BASS, the worldwide retail, worldwide leader in sports. So you have two of the biggest entities, corporate entities on this planet, who were all in on tournament fishing. And for lack of a better term, for that decade, they made it rain.
Yes, they did.
Correct me if I'm wrong. It just was, but to me, it was how the sport was supposed to be like. And that's how my delusions sort of started in terms of, wow, if we're here at 2007, gosh, what's 2025 going to be like? There's, guys, there's going to be hundreds of millionaire fishermen, and it's only going to be
bigger, better, right? As time goes on, things will
right,
evolve and keep getting better, right? But it
and
didn't
then
happen in the fishing world.
well, the recession really took the wind out of. And that's not to say that's just fishing. The recession, the Great Recession, took it out of. It really crushed everything. And coming out of the recession is really where I consider the line of demarcation right there, is the modern era. Especially, really the recession was sometime like, I think it was about the dates were like the 2009, but the real crunch of it didn't hit until like 2012, 2013. You really could feel that to the consumer. And then it took until like 14 and 15 to really climb out of that.
Right.
And the whole fishing industry, the world as you and I knew it before the recession, and the new era coming in, the modern era, is just different. It's just different, not just in the last 5 years, but I really think it, that modern era, I would call it starting about, 2014 or so, 2015 is when change just started happen, and the sport hit a reset. And this is where we end up.
Yeah. Yeah. It's, I, when I'm reading the book and when I was going through the chapters, you almost have these mixed emotions going through, right? Like,
Yep.
as a fan of the sport, as a guy that loves it, passionate about it, as a dad to a son that's aspiring to do it, right? I'm reading it and you're like torn because, it's like, will it ever be that good again, right?
Right.
Like I lived the
Exactly.
golden era, you lived the golden era. Will it ever be like that again? And I want it to be. And in
Right.
fact, I'm going to quote you, Rob, because I wrote this down in my notes, and it was chapter 25, recalculating. And this is you saying this, okay?
Right.
Verbatim. The sport is not going anywhere it hasn't already been. Hopefully, I can be proven wrong, right? And so when I read that, I was like, "Fuck, Rob's right." Like, will it ever get like I'm? You're doubtful but hopeful.
Yeah.
What? I guess I want to ask you, like, what do you say to people that will read this book, understand what it was like, not just from a money perspective, but
Hmm?
positive energy, that
Yes. Yes.
exposure, that
Yeah.
feeling?
Mm.
What do you say to people that read this book that want to do it, aspiring to do it, that say, I want it to be like that again? Can it ever be? What do you say to them?
Well, first of all, I do want to say, like, in that golden era period of time, as you just pointed out, it wasn't all about money. The money was great. That's why I called it the golden era. It was the positive. We all could not wait to get to tournaments.
Oh, it was so unbelievable. The energy.
And and I could not wait to go to weigh in every day, whether I was fishing as a co-angler or reporting on the tournament. It did not matter. I could not wait to go see what the day's stories were that came from the water, and big ones that were lost, and this, that, and the other thing. And yes, there were skirmishes back then, and yes, there were some run-ins with some rule issues, but it just was not. It was not what I loved about the golden era the most, Mike, was the hero's journey. There were so many of them that I saw come into this sport that that were nobody. They were, and I just I loved writing or covering what I call like the hero's journey. During that time, I mean, gosh, there's so many Ott Defoe and Jason Christie and Randall Tharp and guys like John Cox, Cody Meyer. I mean, I've got a list of them. Drew Benton, JT Kenny, who works at MLF now as a commentator. All of those guys, like just like you, they came from modest situations. Not, the whole concept of wealth is very subjective, but they came from modest situations and they went and grinded. They grind, they grinded through the mid-level tours. It didn't happen overnight. They grinded through the mid-levels, they qualified, they won tournaments. They they built houses, they raised families, they bought dreams off of money that was made solely in the fishing industry. And I mean, it's a list that goes on and on and on. Zach Burge, Bobby Lane. I've written a lot of them down over here. Michael Neal, my buddy Randall Tharp, Justin Atkins. I mean, I could go on. I got 25 names listed out over here, and I don't want to leave anybody out. But my point is basically this: that back then I could see a young guy step into the sport, bright-eyed, energetic, up, daylight to dark, putting in the time, grinding, 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 not just for a couple of years, but like, I mean, getting through the Toyotas or the Everstarts or whatever you want to call them back then, or the Opens. And then once they got to the elites, it didn't come easy for them then either. Like they had to, earn respect. And then finally that big win happens, you know, and then you see it change people's lives. And to me, I love documenting that hero's journey. And I just feel like today that hero's journey is just not what it was at one time. And so I don't know, one of the saddest things that I hear guys our age, anglers your age and my age talk about, top pros, is man, when the kids come up to me now and go, I want to do this, what do I need to do? I don't have an answer. I don't know how to, it used to be years ago, get in some red mans, go to the, start here, start there, and work your way up and prove yourself regionally. And they're like, I don't know what to tell them.
Right.
And I don't really know what to tell them either. And I think that's a frustration that's so bothersome for a guy like yourself and myself is what kind of advice do you give them?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. I mean, it
it,
almost feels like the plight of the guy you were describing, that list of names. I always called them regular dudes. That was always my term. Like, it's just a regular dude, right? Like,
right.
just a
John
normal,
Cox.
yes, regular dude. Not, it almost feels like that the sport is, and you talk about this in the book, but it almost feels like that's going away. That the regular dude, because of a lot of reasons, they're in here. They 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 can't do it as easily, or the pathway in isn't there. You know.
Yeah, it's kind of strange. A very close parallel to this, oddly enough, is the whole concept of climbing Mount Everest. I know this sounds weird, but just hear me out for just a second here. Back in the 80s and 90s, people that climbed Everest, they had to do everything pretty much themselves. They still hired what they called Sherpas, the kind of the indigenous people to that area to help them guide them up the mountain. But the people that want to climb Everest had to carry in their own stuff, carry their own oxygen, set their own ropes, set their own ladders, and it took weeks and weeks, and you had to wait on the right weather windows and all of this. And people that did it back then, they did it because they loved. I'm a Mount Everest freak too. Not that I'm gonna try it. Trust me, I just like reading about it. Not they 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 loved mountaineering. They loved just being able to take the next step. And how are we going to take the next step? And what do we need to? And now climbing Mount Everest has become such a commercial enterprise. I'm not saying that you don't have to be in absolute tip top shape physically, cardiovascular, everything. I mean, you got to be in incredible shape to even think about, heck, going to base camp. But more and more, and in the modern era of mountain climbing, you can use money to cut a lot of corners. I mean, you now have the Sherpa guides have already set the ladders and the ropes all the way to the top of Everest. They're already in place. We have so much better clothing and equipment for these guys. You can withstand weather. They've literally gotten to a point like where they can take drones and fly oxygen bottles up, to the higher camps for people that need oxygen. Well, when the people did it in the 80s and 90s, they didn't do any of that stuff. They didn't have helicopters flying supplies up that mountain. And I guess what I'm getting at is, I don't know if you've seen any of the recent pictures, but when they have a weather window, you'll see pictures of a line 100 long of people waiting in line to get to the summit. I mean, they're startling pictures, and they've been the pathway there, the journey, the grit and the grind of the journey has been, the edges have been sanded off of that. Once again, I'm not taking away from it. I'm not going to Mount Everest, and I'm not taking away from anybody that's ever done it. I'm just saying that doing it in 2024 is much different than it was in the 80s and 90s. And there's a lot of millionaire people that are basically commercially, it's a commercial, Mount Everest has become commercial tourism in a way to climb that mountain, and it has a lot of parallels to what we're talking about here in that way. And I'm not, same thing. I'm not saying anybody gets to the elites is a slouch. You have to be in tip top fishing shape to get to the elite series, to get to the Bass Pro. There's no doubt about it. But there's a line in that book that I'm sure I'll eventually catch some grief over. And so I'll just go ahead and say it now, where I talk about the dirt road dream. and how the dirt road dream used to be a gritty road from a real dirt road, and now it's become paved with privilege.
Right.
And I don't mean to insult anybody in that way. When I say privilege, I'm talking about not just wealth, not just financial advantage. I'm talking about things like spot lock on a trolling motor. I'm talking about advantages that you didn't have or other guys didn't have when they started.
Right.
Better technology, better mapping, a whole universe of background of knowledge and stuff on YouTube. There's just so much more there, and that constitutes an advantage that guys didn't have. And it's like the same thing at Everest. The path has been made easier. Now, there's going to be guys that will say, young guys, well, if it's so freaking easy, big boy, come on out and get you some. And I just don't want it taken that way. You know what I mean? Like, I just know that it has, um, I mean, you know what I'm trying to get at? Like, it's just not, gosh, man, I can remember thinking about going out on Okeechobee in the 80s and the 90s with no GPS, no cell phone, no nothing. Those lakes, Ike, were such untapped, giant, mysterious bodies of water.
Ocean.
I mean, in the boats, the boats then were like 18 to 19 foot, going into Ontario. Yes, going to Erie, they were, and even lakes like Lake Eufaula down in Alabama, they were untapped, huge reservoirs. And now these young guys, when they head to a lake, even if they've never set eyes on it before, they know exactly what they're going to do when they get there. They've studied enough, they've watched enough YouTube, they've seen enough, tournament records, to have some idea of what you're going to do when you get there. And then, we've, over the course of time, remember when you thought Okeechobee was this giant place, and it is a giant place, but when you get right down to it, there's about 5 or 6 places on that lake. They're big places, but
Yep.
I mean, you know what I mean? Like, so I don't want to take anything away from the journey not being difficult, but it's definitely, compared to the old gritty times, man, it's not as challenging.
It's different, right? And it probably will never go back to that grind that a lot of the early days, a lot of the early guys went through. I don't think it can ever be the same, and you hit it right on the head. Times change. You've got, wealth changes, situations change, technology changes. So I don't think it can ever be like that again, So that's another one of those ones where it's like, I'm very proud that I had to do it that way, And again, I'm watching, my own son falls into this category, Rob. Exact right? Like, I can't hate on him either. He is a whiz at 40. He has a golden spoon by default. I'm his dad. What am I going to do? Not provide these things when I see the passion he has, right? So he had a John boat at 8 years old. Are you kidding me? At 8, he had a John boat with a trolling motor.
Right.
So I'm going through these things, and I have to be cautious, just like you.
By the way, I've watched you in Vegas fish a little bit, Ike, and I got to tell you a couple things about that are really intriguing to me. One is, I had no idea you were such a good net man.
I'm a pretty good net man.
You're a dynamite net man. I had no idea. Second is, there was one of them that really cracked me up. Vegas caught a big one, and he was up in the front of the boat, and he was celebrating just a little bit, like he was just clapping his hands or something. And you were like, "Hey, stop that! Get back to fishing! Stop that crap!" And I was like, "Hold on, Ike. Wait a minute. Hold on, buddy." I mean, that's the pot and the kettle black right there. Like, when you said that, "Stop that crap! Don't do that," I was like,
so funny that you brought that up, because I've been cornered by that, and I have not publicly addressed it on the show, and I'd like to real quick. it's funny because, I'm very hypocritical when I did that, but there was method to that, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
when I'm captaining him, like
Mm-hmm.
I'm his dad, but I'm also a coach, and I'm trying to
Mm-hmm.
coach, and like what I look back in my career, and I wish at times in tournaments that I could
Mm-hmm.
have harnessed that feeling. Dude, you know it, Rob. You know the
Mm-hmm.
feeling, the
Yep.
energy, and that it's
Oh
like
yeah.
it's a burn, and it comes up
Mm-hmm.
in you. And I wish, when I look back on my career, how many times I could have re-harnessed that energy in a different way to, maybe catch the next fish, or, just a quicker
Mm-hmm.
turnaround. And, like I'm trying to, so I realize I'm being hypocritical because I want him to have fun and I want him to celebrate. But I'm like, man, if I could harness that energy in him in a
Mm-hmm.
different way to make that next fish catch happen quicker or more efficiently, or use that energy in a more efficient way. I look back on my career and I'm like, how many more tournaments could I have won if I did that,
Right.
right? Instead of a
Right.
second or a third or a fifth, I won. And so that's my defense to that. But
No, and and to your point on that, I will say that Vegas is all business. When he sets that hook and gets to reeling, he's all business. And there's one other thing I'm going to point out. I don't take this wrong. The best thing I like about watching Vegas fish is when he hooks up and the rod bows up like really big. He never says, "It's a giant.
never.
It's a giant."
He's way more realistic about fish size than I am. We fished a couple team tournaments this year. We fished one at the very end of the year up here in the north, and yeah, like he even called me out as we were fishing. He's like, "That ain't a 6. It's like a 4. That ain't a 3. That's a 2. What are you talking about? I
That's
said, Dad,
awesome.
let's get a good calculation here. We got to try to win this event. We came in second, so maybe I overcalculated. Um, but I definitely I want to, why we're talking about it, and it's kind of a good time to call you to the plate too, Rob, a little bit.
Sure.
Um,
Sure.
I think in this book, I was only disappointed one time, and
Okay.
it was specifically when you were talking about a forward-facing sonar. And I get it. And dude, this is such a dead horse. I don't want to keep beating it, but you did address it in there, and you handled it in a very logical. It was a great response.
Mm-hmm.
I guess the question to you is like, there is something in me that can never come to terms with forward-facing sonar. I just can't, and I'm doing it. I'm using it. I'm trying to hang. I'm trying to compete. As long as it's legal, I have to do it. My son loves it. I can't hate on it because of him. So a lot of parallels to where we're at. But in my soul, I could never feel like that is a good thing for what is happening in competitive bass fishing. Do you regret at all taking a neutral? You took a neutral stance. You addressed it, but you took a neutral stance. Do you regret
Absolutely.
that at
Yep.
all? Do you feel like that at your core? Talk about that.
Yes, it's a that was a tough chapter to
Yeah,
write.
had to be tough.
It definitely is, especially coming from the old school.
Yeah,
Um, and the thing about forward facing sonar, mm, I mean, it's just been. I think of all like, why us?
I know.
Why did that have to
Could have missed it by 10 years or something.
Right.
Have been fully retired in a retirement home, getting a back rub, not worried about this shit, But
Right.
here we are, you know.
When it first showed up, I took the approach of like, oh, it'll blow over. It's like everything in fishing. It's big and bad right now, but give it a couple years. And man, those are words I have regretted because it has not gone anywhere. It has only gotten more potent, more prolific, and it just I I my main thing is I'm disappointed in the damn bass, man. Like, can't they By now, wouldn't they have learned what the ping sounds like? I mean, gosh, man, I had so much faith in you, bass. Like, I thought you would learn, like, get away from the sing of the ping, go in the woods again. Go up in the, and I was just so confident that in a few years of so much pressure that they would all go back under the mats or they would all go back under the docks.
Rob,
And they haven't.
You don't even know how good this is. This is the first time, and this is probably the best explanation, but it's the first time I ever heard anybody blame it on the bass. And I think you're right. It's their fault.
It's blame it on the bass. I'm like, man, if I could if I could talk to a bass, like, and to some degree with the smallmouth, I get it a little bit. They're more migratory and open water anyway. But I have a real issue with largemouth bass in the South. What are y'all doing out there roaming around like that?
2 tournaments at Okeechobee last year won, or over the last 2 years, one with forward-facing sonar. 2 high-profile tournaments on a lake that's not 10 foot deep.
It just, what are y'all doing out there? Like, why didn't, and the thing that's so frustrating to me is, like, I fished for years. I didn't know they were just all out there swimming around in the middle of nowhere for no reason whatsoever. What the heck? Like, so that part of it really makes me mad. I feel like the bass didn't do, hey, they got used to my white double willow spinnerbait pretty quick 20 years ago. They got used to so many other things that we throw and they don't bite anymore. Or why didn't they? Why? But, to answer your question there, and I know Clark Winlet's super passionate about this topic. A lot of the older guys are. And the thing that bothers me most about forward-facing sonar is that before it came along, the best anglers had an intuitive aspect about them. And you know what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the kind of stuff that Aaron Martins had. Just pure intuition. Guys like
the best that ever lived that had it was Aaron.
Yes.
Yeah.
There's no doubt. He just had a sixth sense about it. Guys like David Dudley, Kevin. There's 12 to 15 guys in this sport that just have a sixth sense on where, when you go to make a flip or a cast, why did you cast it 3 feet this way and not 3 feet that way? Right. Something in the gut made that decision. Yeah. Something that it's like there was some guys that had forward-facing sonar to agree built into their gut before there was forward-facing sonar.
Right. Natural forward-facing sonar.
Natural forward-facing sonar. And to me, that was some of the magic of the game. That the further along you got in a competition, in a 4-day competition, and as just being tired and worn out and getting no sleep, as the distractions increased, these particular individuals were able to decrease the distraction and the suffering and no sleep and whatever, and amp up their intuitive side. It was almost like the gateway to get to that flow state of accessing that intuition inside of you was a process that took suffering and pain. And then, you write about it in that book right there, The Heart in Winning in the Delta. You talk about taking that nap and being like you clicked into the zone. I love the whole concept of the zone in bass fishing. It's one of the things that draws me to it in competitive bass fishing. So as far as forward-facing sonar goes, I feel like technology has leveled that intuitive advantage just some gifted people had. I feel like it levels out the ability to get into flow in a natural state. Now, guys that use forward facing sonar and are extremely good at it would turn to me and argue that I am in a flow state when I'm looking at that screen, and I know how to make the bait placement sink, drop at the right rate so it ends up right there in the fish's face.
Yeah.
I hear you, but it's just not the same as just punching mats, that feel, skipping docks. Should I go this way? Should go that way? That feeling that you get, you're just running down the lake. You're running and you're kind of lost. You're man, nothing. And you see the breeze just looks just right on a bank you've never fished. And it's the Creston Radisson thing, right? It just something, just you don't know where you're going. You pull up there, your brain is shot. You haven't eaten anything. You haven't drank anything all day. You're just been in total grind mode. And all of a sudden, you pull up on a place you've never been before. The wind's blowing on it just right. First cast 3-pounder. Oh my God. Second cast 4-pounder. Now I'm culling. Now I just went from, I feel like, and I might be wrong, forward facing sonar takes away from those magical moments happening that I've seen happen over 20 years. Those magical moments. And another thing too is like, I'm a student of the game. Like when it first came along and I first saw that they just swim around in the middle of nowhere, I'm like, these are all the things I wanted to know. I've always wanted to know, where did they go in September? And now I know. This is great. It's like we're learning how bass work with other species like stripers and carp. They're symbiotic in their relationship. We'd have never known that without that without that technology. So just this moment that I'm like, okay, it's taken away from the intuitive game. I don't like that. Well, I was the one that used to say I would do anything to learn just something this much about a bass. And now it's almost like you stop for a second and you push back and you go, have we learned too much?
Yeah. Be careful
But
what you wish for, right?
It's kind of one of those things.
Yeah.
And so that you're right. You're absolutely right on that. The riding of the fence on forward facing sonar, I went back and forth and back and forth. And ultimately, I never made a point in that chapter. I told this side, I told that side, because I really don't know where I'm at on it. And this is where we always end up. I've watched hundreds of conversations on this topic on your podcast and Mercer's podcast, everybody's podcast. And what the bottom line always comes down is, what do we do? I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. It's so the division runs so deep in old schoolers of what they went through, and the amount of information they have in their head that used to be an advantage. Their playbook used to be an advantage,
Right.
and now it's almost a disadvantage because it's a lot of stuff in your head that gets in the way of faster processing your brain, throwing a minnow to a dot. I mean, it's just,
it changes the game altogether, for sure. But I think you're right, Rob. I think what you did in that chapter, and I called you to the plate just joking around, but it was because there are positives to it and there are negatives to it. But my big thing, and again, this is coming from a guy that has to be careful as well. I got a son who loves it. I'm still a competitor. I got to use it, but and you mentioned this in the book, it takes the mystery away. Like the beauty of the sport for me has always, even with other technologies like GPS and side imaging, technologies that are more fixed and static and that you record and they're in the past, it takes away the element of the unknown, of the mystery. When you see a guy on Lake Fork last year, I'll never forget, Rob. I'm in the back of a creek, and I'm targeting this little drain where my mind had patterned the thing, the way these fish were getting ready to move up to spawn, and all, like you said, all this baggage, it was happening. And I looked behind me at the mouth of this creek into the main lake, and there are literally guys just aimlessly driving around with their trolling motor, just back and forth, looking for dots. And I'm like, this isn't fishing anymore.
Yeah.
It's changed the essence of the sport.
I heard, I think it was on your podcast, wasn't it? You had Bill Lowen and I think Kyle Patton, one of the rookies, and you were, and yep, and that was a really great.
Oh yeah, I love that Kyle was honest with me. Like he knows that I'm and shout out to Kyle for doing that, because he knows my stance on it. But he just straight up, Rob, was like, yeah, at Toledo Bend, man, I went 2 days of practice. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. And oh yeah, my buddy Robert G, he called me and he said, I'll show you how to do it. I hopped in his boat. I put my boat in spot lock. I hopped in his boat for an hour. He showed me what he was doing, and I'm like, all right, this breaks all the rules in my book. First of all, you're using forward-facing sonar. Next one is you're teamed up with somebody. Is this a team event or is it an individual competition? But he said it on the event. So, it's a topic that I'm ready to stop talking about, but I don't know that we'll ever stop talking about it until
he
ends,
The thing that really caught me on that one was, and I don't know Bill Lowen very well at all. Seems like a great guy. I haven't spent any time. One of the few people in the sport I haven't had the privilege of spending time with. But he said something very telling, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, I think this is where I heard it. He said the last day of practice, he drove by that creek and he saw all those people in the middle, and he literally started crying.
Oh yeah.
He literally was like,
Yeah, he knew.
the sport I know is over. Like, it was a truth that was literally too hard to bear. And I that was kind of it was, I listen to a lot of podcasts when I'm like, mowing and doing house chores and stuff like that. But I stopped for a minute on that one, because I was like, wow, that's telling.
It is. And we've had a conversation off air about it, and he literally cried. Like, not figuratively. Like, he cried. And a lot of the guys have a lot. And I've had those feelings, that what you knew and loved and appreciated, everything pure and natural and right, is like, we said it on another Ike Live podcast. It's like Thanos with the glove. Me and Becky talked about this on Ike Live at the bar one night. It's like Thanos puts on the glove, and 50% of the population in humanity, in the universe, is gone.
Gone. Right.
Like,
that's right.
The Thanos glove was put on. A lot of similarities there, but I don't know. I don't know that we'll know anytime soon what's right and what's wrong, and we do have we do have to walk a little bit of a line. I do, for sure.
Yeah, and it's you don't, man, you go back to, okay, so you have to rewind the clock back, when the freaking floating worm first came out, the pink floating worm, and
Joe Humphreys, come on, man.
yep. And you were just so excited to get one and use it, and the excitement of the moment of having the new thing that catches fish, and the biggest thing is, I don't want to take that excitement away from the guys coming in. Like, that's their way of getting fired up to catch a fish, and I don't know that it's my place to take that away from them. I just, that's how that's what when you used to lay awake at night and you just dreamed of, throwing whatever out there, your top water, and they literally dream at night of all the dots and the fish coming up and getting on. I mean, that's what they see at night. That's their vision. That's their, and I don't want to, they get fired up about it. They don't sleep. And that, we were the same way. Just, it was lures and stuff. It wasn't such a potent technology, but the real thing I'm guarded on in the book was, I don't, our the next group coming, is, I don't want to step on. It's really, you talked about the career path chapter, the different stages. I basically added that on in the last 3 or 4 weeks of the book, and it was really due to a young man named Logan Parks. And I don't know Logan at all. Seems like an extremely bright, intelligent young guy. And he did a little podcast kind of deal. And he basically said, I went to a meeting today and it was the same thing. All these old guys complaining about fishing for a living, and how horrible it is to have to fish for a living. And um, he's in the honeymoon phase. That's what I'm getting at.
Right.
He's in the honeymoon phase, and I'm in the back half phase.
Right.
And it's not fair for me to take his excitement away about where he is in life and what he's doing. And it's that's where it all gets really, you really get in the weeds on that. You know what I mean? It's I wanted to recognize that just because the tone of my book might be some of the, more of a kind of a, a winding down of a career kind of feel to it, it doesn't mean that there's not a bunch of guys out there that are in the honeymoon phase of the sport who can't wait to get to the next tournament with their buddies, just like we were. And I don't want to take that away from anybody.
And I appreciate that, and I think that's the way you have to look at it, or you stymie the whole new group of people that want to do what we love.
Yeah.
I think that's a good way.
Yeah.
Also, Rob, I've got one more piece of the book that I read, and I thought this is going on. It was a great way to address it, and it's more timely than ever. And
Okay.
I'm actually going to quote you again. It's only twice I'm going to put my glasses on in this podcast.
Okay.
And so this was chapter 18. It was the ceaseless cycles on the high seas. Was the chapter.
Okay.
Again, this is you, Rob. This is what you said.
Okay.
The pros have no recourse. They are essentially powerless against the organizations other than griping on social media. That's such a true statement. It is
Correct.
a true statement. Like,
that's
this
correct.
is going on right now, right?
Correct.
You know better than anyone the last 4 to 6 years of the sport. It's this oppressive cloud of negativity and this and that and this league and that league and forward-facing sonar. And then you couple that with anglers that are really dissatisfied with the guys they fish with, the organization.
Right.
I guess I wanted to call this out and say, with everything going on and knowing there's this frustration and fear and anger and this cloud, can the anglers ever break through? And before you answer that, like, real stuff happening now on the bass side, right? Like, Bass saying no entries, Bass saying, oh, there's this angler group. Okay, we'll sort of recognize you. Maybe not officially on paper yet,
right.
but we'll sort of,
right.
So is there hope for these guys? And again, take it for this. I'm probably out in the next 5-10 years. You know that. I'm in the last stage of my career.
Right.
I shouldn't care, but I do.
I understand.
I'm still very, very angry and mad that the organizations don't give us any say. Like, is this something that could ever change, Rob, or is it the way that you've got it here? We're always going to be powerless. Are we always going to be powerless to the organizations?
Yeah, the book was sort of born on the vicious cycles of the sport that seem to hamstring us all the time. I call them value vortexes. And I don't know why I came up with that name. It's just that they kind of silently suck the value out of the sport. And it's not any one that you can point at. It's just kind of a silent. What gets aggravating after 30 years is seeing not just the last 5 or 6, but the last 30 years is seeing some of the issues come up over and over again, and then the cycles of how that's handled. I mean, I'm not saying that Bass's appointing of these particular board, panel members, committee members. I'm not going to say it's not going to work. It might work out fantastic for them. But this isn't the first time this has been done. Like, you know that. This cycle goes back. Yes, this cycle goes back. It's been done 3 or 4 times in other leagues. And it never really has any resolution. It has more of a lip service feel to it. Now I'm going to get shredded for that, I know. It's these cycles on that same quote that you just said, the anglers don't have any recourse except social media or, to go start a new tournament trail, which is another cycle that happens in this sport that keeps it completely out of, it's a shell game to some extent. Right. Well, now we need to go fish that one. Well, now we need to go fish this one. Which one do we fish? And they layer on top of it, and the value vortexes start to see, now they're 3 leagues competing for the same resources. They're competing for the same anglers. They're competing for the same sponsors. They're competing for the same air times. We now have weeks where there's 3 live streams going on at one time.
Simultaneously. Yeah.
At the same time.
Crazy.
Like, I'm not saying I'm Nostradamus, but I just don't think there's any future in that. No. We need unity we have to have some kind of unity to get eyeballs on the same screen. And that is.
And I want to add to that a lot. In the past, that has also been done on purpose, maliciously, in the leagues. Not in every case.
Right.
It has been done in the past where events are scheduled on top of each other on purpose. That's sad.
Yeah, it's and it's like, why wasn't this happening back in the Ray Scott days? Well, it's because there was one league and there was one BASS, there was one Bassmasters television show, there was one TNN, the Nashville network, that aired it. All the eyeballs were on one thing. And everybody that watched the greats compete in those days, the Cochrans, the Cluns, the Browers, as viewers, we could all agree on this. The standards being fished by they were all fishing the same lake. They were all fishing by the same rules. There was no 3 world champions in 1 year kind of thing. There was that was it. When Denny Brower won a tournament in the good old Bassmaster days, he was the king for that period of time. That's right. There was no what about this guy over here won this, or what about there was just one. When you won a tournament at BASS back in that time, you were king, not for 15 minutes, not you won a tournament and getting talked about because somebody was cheating somewhere else and that became the story. Right. You were the king. And that tournament win, the value of that tournament win lasted a long, long, long time. Yep. And you didn't necessarily need a union or a group, right, because everybody was all in one place. Right. Now we're all over the place. And you might have seen the pitch that I made in one of the chapters about and I'm not saying this is, I wanted to leave some kind of solutions in the book, as outlandish as they might be. I just still believe that there's a way to initiate a tour card in this sport.
For all anglers, right? So guys, an MLF or bass or
doesn't matter where you fish.
If
right.
you fish, you're a part of this association, and then you can reap the benefits of that association, right? Which would be, and you mentioned them, and that chapter was great, standards, right? Scheduling, sponsorships, even controlling your own destiny as far as health insurance, retirement plan, media, right? Your own PR.
Correct.
Yes, dude, that's the vision.
Yeah.
How amazing would that be? And we need that. But Rob, can it ever happen? That's the question.
It's so fragmented at this point. That's why this is sort of the swan song for me in terms of we've just reached a point of fragmentation and dilution that I don't know how to even theoretically, even if I could solve all the fishing world's problems with the, I mean, if you gave me the power to do that, I wouldn't know how to do it, Ike. I don't know that anybody would.
Thanos glove.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
Put the glove on and be like, okay, no forward-facing sonar. Tonk.
boom, gone.
We need an association for all the pros, and they all are on the same page. Tonk.
Yeah, I mean, even if you gave me the power, the genie in the bottle to do that, I don't even know where to. It's so all over the place now, and I don't know where it goes from here. We're fragmented by forward-facing sonar versus non-forward-facing sonar, 5 fish limit versus all you fish, all all you can catch, generational division. In order for this sport to get to that point where it was for a few brief years in the ESPN days when the eyes were on you guys, everybody has to be in the same league, in the same, everybody's got to be on that same page. I mean, you just can't have all this. Yeah, well, well, if you don't like it, you can go fish the forward facing sonar tournament, or you can go over here and fish this. And then look, sports, NFL and all that's real simple. There's only one place to go get it. And everybody agrees that those guys on those fields, they're playing by a set of rules that everybody watching understands and knows what happens. When the penalty flag is thrown, they don't go, we had a targeting call. Can't tell you who it was, but we had a targeting call, and we threw the flag on them, and it's going to be 15 yards. You just, no, it's just not the way it works. And so you can't speak out of both sides of your mouth in terms of, we want great ratings. We want all the eyeballs in one place. Oh, but now we're going to need a non-forward facing sonar tour and a forward facing sonar tour and this and it's just, you just can't, you can't. We have a, yes. And I really don't know how to repair that. And the truth of the matter is it's out of our hands. I'll go back to Logan Parks for a minute. He, one reason that young man captured my attention was because he put on a tournament at Lake Martin, where you probably know about this insane tournament that he sort of visualized and put together, and he had the college kids draft the high school kids, and it was like 150 college kids. And I mean, I don't want to speak for his tournament. I went through the drafting process, and I don't know exactly how it all works. But I'll tell you this, that's where the future, I mean, like, he picked elements of the future of this sport that are, you know what I mean? The every fish counts, the bringing the parents in the Jumbotron and in the big stadium there. I thought everything he did there was really smart. Really good. And that's, he sees it from his, from his young age, from his angle, from his lens. And it looked like a hugely successful tournament. And that's where it's, you know what I mean? Like, I know for my fact, I'm not going to have any say-so in any of this very much longer. And he's the kind of guy that group is going to deal with what you just asked. Where do we go from here? How is this going to be solved? And I do think that somebody that is driven. I remember Logan Parks the most because he's the one that won the Johnny Morse tournament. I think that's correct. He and Tucker Smith. Correct. Okay. I actually covered that tournament. You'd think I'd know that better, but what I'm getting at is I do spend a lot of time on the phone with these young guys, and they have a lot of good ideas about what's good about this league, and we're going to take it and use it to our advantage. What's good about this league, we're going to take that and use it to our advantage. What's good about they have the ability now to take the parts and pieces to possibly manufacture something that you and I haven't even thought of yet.
Right.
And I really think that that's where it's coming from. It's going to come from these guys that can take the technology like the Bubba scale, which is an incredible piece of technology. I mean, I have no relationship with them. You know, this is not but to be able to weigh your fish and it goes to a big master console scorekeeper. You can fish 3 guys against each other. You can fish 500 guys against you. You can play a game of pickup bass fishing if you wanted to on any afternoon. I think some of these pieces of technology are going to come into play. These younger guys are going to know how to put it together. And I mean, he had a stadium full of parents and family and friends cheering those guys on in there. And it was really a big deal. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I wasn't there. I saw some pictures from it and I was like, man, I don't know when the last time I saw, other than the Bassmaster Classic, obviously, a crowd of people that engaged in bass fishing. And that's the magic sauce. And I think some of these young guys are going to figure that kind of stuff off. And it's just like, I don't know, it's kind of like a passing of the torch kind of thing. You know what I mean? It's just, I know for me personally, and one of the whole things of the book, kind of going back to where we started, sending everything out into a little boat into the ocean is, what this has been about. Like letting go of, I can't control how they're going to format tournaments anymore. I never could, but I could roll with the changes to a certain point, and it's now getting to a point where I think they're going to, I do think you ask where it's going, and about the only good answer I can come up with is the Logan Parks of the world and these guys that are in their groups and their crews, just like we were when we were all that age. I think they're going to have some solutions that with current technology that we haven't even thought about yet.
And that's what needs to happen, right? We need to have the next group that have those same dreams and hopes and aspirations and want to see a better sport. And I think guys like Logan, I think there's enough Logan Parks like that will make that happen. So there is hope for the sport. There's hope for the sport. Rob, last question. And this is honestly, I'm not saying this to make your head big, but these are like usually 50-minute podcasts. Dude, we've been talking for like almost hour and 40 minutes, and I feel like we could talk for we could probably go a little longer. Right. It's unbelievable. But I guess this question, I'm trying to frame this one right, but sometimes when people write a book, they do a book project or whatever, like there's a change coming, right? I've seen a lot of authors, they're like, oh, they'll put this book out, and then a big change is happening. Well, what do you got going on? 25 right around the corner. What, you have a big change coming? You have new projects? What do you got in 25 lined up, Rob?
Oh, I don't know. The biggest thing for me is I think that, I as a reporter, I mean, it's funny. It's getting to the point where with some of these young guys, they talk in a language that I don't even understand. I talked to a young man on the phone this year covering the Tiger Warehouse Invitational, and he said, man, I'm throwing the dice on the verts. I'm throwing the dice on the verts. And I was like, I think I have the wrong number. Like, I don't even know what you're talking about. And
that a surfer from California.
Yeah, I'm like, are we? Yeah, that's exactly. Man, you're on the? I thought it was like skateboard talk, is what it sounded like. And I honestly thought like, and he explained to me that he was throwing the dice, the rubber dice, the deal on the vertical faces of rock. Like he was like, instead of, he wanted vertical faces, so he was he was rolling the dice on the verts. Now, I know when it's my time to go, and I know when I'm being shown the pasture, kind of shown the pasture and put out in the field, right? So I know in my time, it's not. I've had hints about that as to, I just get the intuitive feeling. But when you no longer know the lingo, and these young guys are rolling lingo like that by you all the time, and you're having to ask for clarification, it's time to go. You know what I mean? As a reporter. And I mean, I don't know. I don't know what the situation is. I might work some of I'm waiting to see what the word is on the Tackle Warehouse Invitationals. That's kind of the last thing I was doing for MLF is that, and I still love doing it. I will always love looking at guys fishing and talking about it. That's just it, or writing about it or whatever. I used to write a lot. That's going away. So to answer your question, Ike, I'm gonna, I think what I'm up to here is, we have a place down at the coast, down at the coast of Florida, in the Forgotten Coast there, and a little double wide. And I think I'm going to go the Jeff Crete route. And I don't know if anybody knows about Jeff Crete's situation, but
The
Jeff
good
Crete,
life, living the
yeah,
good life.
he's doing all right. Um, he now runs a charter business, an excursion type business, not so much fishing, but an excursion type
Yeah,
business over at Crab Island in Destin, which is a huge tourist place, and
yeah,
Crete does very well with that. We're on a more forgotten coast. It's a more obscure part of the coast, but there's still a lot of interest in the last 10 to 15 years of people that just literally want to, they're from Wisconsin or Ohio or whatever, they come to the Gulf and they just want to ride around. They want to see a dolphin. They want to pick up a sand dollar. They want to feel warmth in the sun and, swim in crystal clear waters and, that kind of thing that, it's not so much about fishing for them. They just want to go. And some people just want to go out to the sandbar and have a good time and, be chartered out there and, with the family and whatever and just chill. So, currently that's kind of what I'm looking at. I will always be up for any kind of content in the sport. I like ghostwriting. I think I'll probably come up with another something to write about in the sport. I'm, like I said, I'm really attracted to the whole idea of the flow state in fishing. I
yeah,
think that would be a next topic I would probably try and jump on. I've spoken with some of the guys that I think are really good at that process. Unfortunately, they don't want to talk about it a whole lot,
yeah.
and I think I understand why they think but I will continue to write. I've done YouTube content for people before. You know, I'd kind of like you can't do excursions 12 months out of the year, so maybe marry a summertime excursion business with fishing content and see where it goes from there.
Well, that's awesome, Rob. I wish you a lot of success in whatever endeavor you do, and I do want to tell you that I'm so thankful that we got to form a friendship and work together in the golden era of the sport. It's honestly, it's like, it's a memory, of that time in my career and my life that will never leave me. It was for sure probably the highlight of my career is those years. And
Yeah.
and to have you there for a lot of it was really cool. So,
Yeah, one of my favorite memories with you, Ike. I happened to be there the night that you won the classic, and you were in that bar breakdancing with your shirt
oh
off.
yeah,
It was, yeah. So it was,
brilliant night.
that was fun times. Those are the kind of memories that I look back on, and you got to let the next generation experience those kind of things. And I appreciate you having me on and helping me promote the book a little bit. And I really appreciate the fact that it was nice to talk to another person that's wrote a book. It takes a lot, as you know, even if you had people aiding you along with that, the revision process, all that kind of stuff. And I knew you kind of had an idea of how much effort it takes to get to this point. So
It's a lot.
um,
It's a
I
lot of work.
appreciate.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a lot of
I
work, but it does pay off in the end when you have a finished product. Uh, Rob, real quick, so guys, if you're watching this, egos, logos, and fishing pros. It's an inside look at professional bass fishing in the modern era. Rob, where can they get it? I know Amazon, of course, but where can they get it? How can they find out about it? Give them some more information.
Amazon's it. I mean, Amazon's the one-stop shop. I mean, they have that KDP program is really, I think, a good program. And like I said, we'll have a more of the Kindle version coming out sometime in January. I wanted to put it out the paperback version first because, like you said, I wanted to hold it in my hands, not on a Kindle. You know what I mean? I wanted to have the paper there, and
Feels so nice. Yes.
that's right.
Well, Rob, it was awesome, and
Yep.
so great having you on and catching up. Let's stay in touch. And Christmas, New Year's right around the corner. Rob, I hope you have a wonderful Christmas. I hope you have a good New Year. I appreciate you coming on the show.
I appreciate it, Ike. Merry Christmas to you and the family, too.
Merry Christmas, Rob. We'll talk soon.
Thanks, my friend.
Bye. All right, guys. There you have it. That was awesome. And I wasn't just saying that to Rob. Like, this went an hour and 45 minutes, guys. And it was such a great conversation. I think because it's a great book, and it honestly made me feel like what I was thinking, my view of the history and the future of the sport. Like, I'm not out on the island. Like, Rob's thinking a lot of the same things I was thinking. It's a great read. I don't care if you're new to fishing, if you've been fishing for 1,000 years. Pick this up. Head over to Amazon and get the book. It's a great, great read. Thank you to Rob for spending some time with us right here before Christmas. Guys, let me remind you, this podcast is brought to you by Abu Garcia Rods and Reels. They make some great stuff. Head over to abugarcia.com. Check out their entire lineup of rods and reels. Also, the Ike Series 3.0 is out right now. Go to wherever you shop, especially Tackle Warehouse. They got some great deals going on. Pick up the Ike Series 3.0 rods and reels. Also brought to you by the Ike Foundation. If you want to find out on how to get more kids fishing, head over to the IkeFoundation.org. Also, real quick reminder, the Ike Foundation Scholarship Dinner, Friday, January 31st. Still tickets and tables available. Come on out, eat, drink, dance, party, auction items, all to raise money to get new kids fishing. Guys, thank you for watching. I want to end this show and basically say, guys, I hope you have a wonderful Christmas. I hope you have time with the family. I hope it's just a nice week. Also, I hope New Year's Eve is great, and I hope your 2025 is wonderful. Thank you guys for watching. Until the next one, we'll see you at Ike Live. Bye.
Do you fish for excitement? Do you fish for passion? Do you fish to get outside? Or do you fish to win? Abu Garcia for life. You know, right now where we're standing, we're in Camden, New Jersey.
Yeah.
Philadelphia is right there. This is the concrete jungle. And, you know, a lot of those kids, as they grow up, they don't fish. It's interesting because they're surrounded by water, you know, the Delaware River, the Schuylkill, ponds, city park lakes, but they don't have the influence to cast, to fish, to have a rod and reel. And that became our focus, you know, is to target kids in what we call non-traditional areas, you know, urban areas, city centers, where the population's high, and let these kids have an experience. You know, it's amazing. I mean, some of the experiences we've had, whether it's Central Park in New York City, here in Camden, other parts of the country, even just casting.
Yeah.
It's unbelievable to see it, isn't it?
Yes.
It's unbelievable.
Yes.
And you know, you see these kids have this experience they've never had, and they light up, you know? The big thing, I think, for the Ike Foundation is we're not saying we want all these kids to become professional anglers.
Yeah.
Be great if some of them did, but we want them to have that fishing experience because it ties them to so many other positive things. The outdoors, nature, conservation. Ecology, you know, all these amazing things in life that maybe they wouldn't have been exposed to any other way. We're trying to help with that. So it's important. It's important for us.
Yeah.
We're proud of it.
I subscribe to Bass U TV, and so should you.
Great place to learn about anything you want to know about bass fishing.
You get it at Bass U. We got the best of the best.
I'm not just an instructor, I'm a subscriber.
I'm John Cruz, and I am a subscriber.
You can always learn, and watching Bass U definitely helps with that.
It's something that I like to do, and it's definitely something that you need to do.
If I'm still learning, you should be too.
Subscribe to Bass U because you'll learn how to catch a lot more fish.
Ike Live, brought to you exclusively by Abu Garcia.